Moving on to our next
Yes,
conversation, we want to talk about some recent, or should I say, reoccurring events between Nigeria and Ghana, as well as between Nigeria and South Africa. And now this, more about how they are raising serious questions, not about the events per se, but how they impact, Pan-Africanism, as it will seem, amidst, this African Union's Agenda 2063 for a borderless continent. And I say this because we appear to be seeing two visions colliding here. Vision number one says there are no strangers amongst Africans. Vision number two says, look, Africans are strangers in their own continent. But the question is this: can we ever truly build a continent where every African, regardless of their birthplace, can live, work, and belong without fear? My guest is Dr. Stephen Gbatibi Ben Jewel. He is President, Pan-African AU Agenda 2063 Diplomatic Mission. Doc, thank you so much for joining us. It's a pleasure to have you on Insight.
thank you very much, sir.
So,
It's
Doc,
glad, and also good afternoon, Nigerians.
thank you so much for coming on our program. Doc, I'm sure you've heard my intro, so I want you to dissect this whole issue of African unity, more than just a diplomatic talking point, more within the context of what we're seeing play out, across the continent, not just because of what we've seen play out in Accra, Ghana, or what we've seen, play out in Joburg, South Africa. But I'm saying this because it has happened time and again. So I need your take on three germane issues. First is the issue of migration, intracontinental migration, and now we think there should be a shift in that conversation from migration, being reframed now as a right and not a concession. Second, I'll need your take on this whole concept of protocols of free movement that we have across the continent, whether it's ECOWAS protocol on free movement and all of that, and and SADC and all of that, but more about its compatibility with public order. And then we'll talk about how violence and divisions, violence as a response to some of these issues, is causing division and self-inflicted wound on the continent as it were. So, Doc, three issues that I want you to respond to. First, migration as a right. Second, free movement protocols within the continent. And third, as a response mechanism to some of these issues. Doc, your take.
All right, thank you very much for this. To start with, I'm glad when I see a foremost television agency like NTA concerned about this subject matter. As we all know, that Africa unity has become a major subject, and unfortunately, some of the key people who pushed the agenda of Africa unity are no longer alive, like the Muammar Gaddafi, the Kwame Nkrumah, and the rest of them. If you look at it from some angles, you'll find out that somehow Africa's unity has always become a subject matter of threat to um, the global system, the global world, and somehow whoever tries to champion Africa's unity completely also becomes a major enemy of the global world. Let me just use it that way. But unfortunately, they said when your enemy is the enemy without, you know what you're fighting against. But when the enemy is the enemy within, then it becomes more deadly. We all know that aspiration two of Agenda 2063 talks about an integrated continent where every trade can take place, free movements of people, you understand completely. What unfortunately is the saddening reality that we have today is the fact that uh, within ourselves, Africans, there is this complex issue. The other time we knew how the Ghanaians were agitating that Nigerians should leave Ghana. But the most troubling part of this is what is currently happening in South Africa, where the xenophobic attack, where the average South African, the native South African wants not just Nigerians, but every other Africans to leave. We all see this from different angles. It has a lot of political undertone. The elections are close, and somehow Nigerians are trying to are using it to see how they can buy votes. That's why there has been
we, we,
some sort of
we don't
fifth
know this for a
columnist
fact,
amongst.
but we know that some of what we see playing out is actually impacting the supposed African unity that we preach. That's the agenda, AU
Yes,
Agenda 2063 intends to achieve. And that's why I mean, doesn't it amount to mere rhetorics when we say we're adopting an agenda for the continent, and then in practice, we're seeing continents or countries within regional blocks and regional blocks, whether it's West Africa, whether it's the Southern Africa, not adhering to some of these treaties and binding treaties, I dare say, that they have especially on free movement.
Exactly. That's why, I was trying to build up some things to address what you are saying. That is why it is troubling. And for us from the Pan-African EU Agenda 2063 diplomatic mission, just last week, I was at Addis Ababa. I went with about a 15-man delegate to Addis Ababa, and we had several meetings. We were privileged to be with the number 3 person in the AUC, in the person of Ambassador Bankole Adeoye of the Political Affairs, Peace and Security, is the commissioner, and we spoke about some of these things. We came up with a solution because what is happening right now is that our unity is being threatened.
Yes.
The first 10 years in African Union was designed to silence the gun, but we are not silencing the gun. We're in the 13th year already. That gun. So that's why from our diplomatic mission, we work towards creating what we call the Community Peace Monitor, because we realize that peace in itself starts from the community. It starts from escalating matters. We have noted, because we're trying to do what we call evidence-based. What is happening within the continent right now is that several factors trying to undermine the treaty that leaders came together to keep. Political factors, some persons that will choose to make sure that things are frustrated, and so that their failure should not be seen, they instigate the populace to tell them, the foreigners amongst you. I mean, calling an African a foreigner on the African soil is even an error in itself, based on the free movement. And unfortunately, we are carrying out several activities to speak to this. We are doing a press conference in just about 2 or 3 days from now on the intra-Africa road expedition, which we are talking about free visa movement amongst Africa. All Africans should be considered as one.
Africans.
You understand? That
Yes.
is the stand of the African Union. But unfortunately, that's not what we are seeing playing out
And there are
across
reasons.
different states.
And there are reasons. As a matter of
Yeah.
fact, there are reasons for some of what was seen play out, because ultimately, part of the reason we want to see an integrated continent are economic.
Yeah.
Yet, there are economic grievances. Part of the reasons we're
Yes.
seeing some of these divisions are also economic grievances. They arise from economic grievances. I took some time to look up the unemployment figures in South Africa, for instance, and I noticed that it exceeds over 33%, especially amongst young black South Africans. Actually, it tops 45%, as a matter of fact. You know, some have argued that xenophobia is a rational response to genuine scarcity, and that immigrants, that, you know, even if they create jobs overall, that they compete for the same informal sector opportunities as the desperate locals. You know, others argue, there are other arguments, and I'm not saying there are others who do not argue on the other side. Those ones say that, look, xenophobia is an irrational scapegoating manufactured by the elite, and I think that's when you reference that it might have some political undertones, you know, to deflect from governance failures. Yes. I don't know that, but we're just saying it as it is. Where do we draw, Doc, where do we draw the line between economic grievance and xenophobic prejudices? You know, specifically, can a country with severe unemployment, do you think a country with unemployment issues, maybe as the figures we've mentioned earlier, do you think such a country can truly embrace free movement? Do you think, I mean, do you think that is even possible to play out in a country battling on its own with scarce economic resource, and then you have people supposedly creating more jobs or coming to struggle for the same small resources that they have? Isn't that like a landmine as it is?
Yes, I agree with you. The average South African, for example, South African labor law is one of the strictest and toughest labor law. As a matter of fact, it is designed in such a way that before a foreigner can get a job, all the options to make sure that it's just like what happens in Nigeria. I don't know how much it has changed, where they have different catchment areas. Some areas are seen as educationally less advantaged or whatever state. So, educationally less advantaged states, yes. And all of these things, what happens is their cutoff mark is lessened. That's what South Africa has done. Specific skill sets and every other thing, and job options, especially in their public sector. An average South African it's until they don't find a South African that can fit into that space before they open it up to other people. But what is now happening is that, let's not forget that a lot of foreigners have come into South Africa. Like I said last time when I was at NTA, still NTA morning show, I said one of our senators talked about we should give them fire for fire. We should, all South African organizations should be stopped. I said, if we do that, Nigerians will be worse hit, because now, whenever you talk about South Africa, the only thing that comes to people's mind is ShopRite, which is not existent as far as I'm concerned. What do they call it now? Multi-choice, which a lot is happening. But and I challenge people to say, go around the street, just be picking out South Africans for me. They really don't really travel out so much to places setting up things. But Nigerians, other parts of Africans are very ingenious. They are the ones that have infiltrated their microeconomic space with different organizations, companies, and every other thing. And somehow, these people are very important to the economy. And now, I don't know how much they adhere to that South African labor law. But to start with, people that must be employed must be well trained. Just like we have an aspect of it in every country, including this country. Like I tell people, I'm an employer of labor. I know what I'm saying. A lot of Nigerians are not ready to work. They are not ready to. Everybody's trying to hammer. People no longer want to learn skills anymore. You have jobs, but there's nothing
wrong with wanting to hammer if it's in a good and legit way. I want to hammer.
I know. I'm not doubting that. I'm not doubting that. But what is happening right now is that, for the South African scenario, many of them, we all know this, those who like to sit, just they love enjoyment against real work. Entitled mentality, sitting down and just thinking that the people that have come in, that have created these jobs, are their problem. You understand? So if that is not addressed by probably doing real national reorientation, and also, even though I believe certain sanctions have to be taken from the apex bodies in the AUC to be able to call to order, because what is happening is that we're not seeing enough active declaration from the hierarchy of their governments, for example. So what is happening is that all the presidents, the declarations made by presidents of different countries is being threatened by the fact that citizens who are probably wallowing in abject poverty, just said, the unemployment rate is high, and their politicians are trying to say, see, we're not the cause. These are the people. So everybody is quiet. It's affecting the continental agenda, which should allow for free movement, where an African, because really Agenda 23 says that there should be free movement, but how many countries have made that possible? Even we, the diplomats, we who work in this space, we still have to go through a lot of clearance, a lot of things. We had the wealthiest man or the richest man in Africa say that he still has to, for him to go into 33 African countries, he must still get visas to be able to get into those places. So free protocol, free movement. Of course, many of them will tell you, for security reason, which there's no doubt about it. But how is it possible in the European Union, for example, that movement is a free movement? Once you are in the European Union, you do at least, maybe the regional bloc like ECOWAS have tried. You can go to some of the ECOWAS countries without much. For some of the region, it's made a bit easier. But if you want to move from here to Addis Ababa, from here, of course, places like Rwanda allows you to go visa free. Places like Kenya allows you to go visa free. But still, most of the countries, as I speak to you in Africa, that has not been made possible. You understand? But even
Yes.
when that is going to be possible, and the indigens of that place are not well oriented, and some of the socioeconomic factors are not properly dealt with, you may, just like you said, it may just be some situational suicide, some, so it may just be even setting some other Africans like a trap, where you go to a country in the name of I can go there to live, yet others are insecure. And as I'm talking, really, what is happening right now is not new. If you look at history, you look at even into times before now, you find out that whenever anybody comes into a land and the person starts becoming very prosperous, there's this thing for the natives to easily say, you have come to take our wealth, you have come to take what belongs to us. If you ask a lot of South Africans, we have lovely South Africans who completely disagree with this xenophobic attack. You
Indeed.
understand? So certain persons
Indeed, and the
are
South African
taking
government,
advantage.
as a matter of fact, Doctor, South African government has also come out to say, look, this does not
Yeah,
reflect where our position or where we stand on the issue of migration. Even though they went on
migration,
to
yeah.
also acknowledge that the people have a right to protest against illegal, no such thing as illegal,
Yeah.
irregular migration. But Doc, I think this is where we would draw a curtain on our conversation for now. We're totally out of time. Of course, there will be other opportunities to. The situation as it is, we know that the situation in Accra is camp for now, and that was because of President Tinubu's and his Ghanaian counterparts' quick intervention. And yes, peace has returned then. Well, the situation in South Africa is quite fluid, but I know both from both ends, Nigeria and South Africa, work is ongoing to ensure that peace and quiet also returns on that front as well. I'd like to thank you so much, Dr. Stephen Gbatibi Benjuel, President, Pan-Africa AU Agenda 2063 Diplomatic Mission. Thank you so much for your thoughts on this matter.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much for having me, and I look forward to more time with you and the station. God bless you.
Definitely. And you too, sir. And you too. Elizabeth Omori is up next. She will be having yet another critical conversation, and let's just bring her up next to continue with this episode of Insight. Elizabeth Omori.